Hey YouTube, what's good? Welcome to today's Front-End Framework Friday. Today we'll be looking at choo.js, a 4 kilobyte front-end framework that has you building applications in no time. So let's get started off. What is choo? I came across the framework by scouring through GitHub's repositories. It is a 4 kilobyte front-end framework that allows you to build front-end applications using JavaScript and HTML. The benefit of Choo over other front-end frameworks is that it's really small and quite easy to use. The reason I like it is because it's quite flexible. You can structure your application as you like. A drawback to this might be that if you're inexperienced or haven't seen structured front-end frameworks, you might find it difficult to manage a large application. But let's have a look at the documentation. If we read through, the goal of Choo is to be super minimal, uh, easy to begin. If you know JavaScript, HTML, CSS, you can start building quite quick. It took me less than a few hours to see what this is all about. Um, The features that we will be looking at today is available in a repository that I've created. You can just follow this link and find the application. It won't be the exact application because I will be rebuilding it, and I have already a few ideas that I want to update during the build. But in summary, what we're going to look at is the state, templates, and updating the front end. So here's an example of the application. What we want to do is we want to create these small little posts in an input form that just says, hi, I am a post, and we can click create post, and the post will add to the list of posts. Each post has a time. As you can see, I changed the structure a little bit from the previous post, and each post is likable and unlikable. At the moment, these are unlikable and likable into infinity because I got too lazy. But this small little application will show you the core ideas behind Choo and how to create a little application like this. So without further ado, let's get started. So to start off, if you want to build your own application with Choo, I recommend going to their website, choo.io, and clicking on the start with the handbook. This is a little takes you to a little website where you can edit source code and follow along their example to build a small little application. Today we'll be building our own application, and it shows how to bring this into a local development environment and not an online editor. So to get started, I'm going to open up my code editor, and to be able to use this framework, you will need npm, Node Package Manager, and you'll have to have Node installed on your computer to be able to use these features. So to get started, we'll create a directory called choo.example where we'll put in all this code, and we'll cd into that directory. And because this is a Node project, we'll have to initialize npm. Adding the -y flag so that I don't have to answer any questions. After the npm has been initialized, I'm going to install a few dependencies. It's only two. It's choo and a bundler. So what the bundler does is it makes your Node code readable to the browser. Let's do that, and I'll explain as we get into the code. So first I'm going to install choo, which is the front-end framework. After that has been installed, I'm going to install a development dependency called parcel. So parcel is a zero configuration web application bundler. What this means is it looks at the entry point of your application. In our case, it's going to be the index.html. It's going to find all the things that you import, for example, a script, And if you go to the script, it will look at all the dependencies being imported there, and it will make the code readable in the browser. I really like Parcel because it really is a zero configuration web application bundler. So to install that, I'm going to run npm install -d because it's a development dependency, parcel-bundler. After the parcel bundler has been installed, I'm going to clear my console and open this in my code editor. The file structure would be your node modules, which has been installed by installing parcel bundler and choo. If you look at the package.json, you'll find your choo dependency and your parcel bundler dependency. So I'm going to start off by adding a start script just to simplify when we try to run this application. And I'm going to say parcel index.html. So this is saying bundle my assets using parcel, and the entry point is index.html. So now we have to create that file, index.html. And I'm going to use a shortcut to create a quick starting point. I'm going to call this choo example. I'm not very creative when it comes to names, so please don't judge me. And then I'm going to add a script tag up here with the source of index.js. And in order to test this, I'm going to create an index.js file, and in there I'm going to say console.log you are importing me. Save that, and we can open. I'm going to use VS Code's integrated terminal. Let me zoom into the code a little bit more so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to hide the sidebar for now, and in the integrated terminal I'm going to say npm start. That's going to use parcel. It's going to use index.html as the entry point. It's going to spin up a little server for us, and if we go to the browser and we enter localhost 1234, we'll have to look at the console and it'll say you are importing me. So we are busy pulling in this index.js, and parcel is now watching all our changes. So let's say I'm changed. We have to escape that character and save that, and it picks up the change. Great, so we have a hot reloading application. So before starting with any of the choo code, I'm going to take an approach where I first build the static website or static layout of the website, and then we'll migrate into a dynamic rendering website and where we use user input. So to get started, I'm going to create a div with the ID of content, and in that div I'll create another div, and I'll explain why this is important when we get to choo to have this div inside there. Then we'll create a nav, and in the nav we'll have an h3 with the title of the website. We'll just call it choo.js, and under the nav we'll have a section, and this section will have an ID of make post, and this is where we'll keep all our input and submit button. So let's add our first input with type text, and we'll give it a ID of post, and we'll name it post as well. And below that we'll add an input of type submit, and the value will be create post. Let me add, so there's our initial HTML. Let me add a line breaks word wrap so that you guys can see what I'm doing. Below this section, I'm going to add a post title to indicate where the post will start, and I'll give it a class of post title, posts title to be more specific. And emit is going to break if I do that, so let me just do posts dash title, and I'll just say recent posts. Save that. Below that, we'll add another div, and we'll give this we'll leave out the class. In this div, we'll create a div with the class post, and in the post div, we'll have the post content, which will contain the actual post itself. We'll just say hello world for now. And below that, we want a little timestamp. So let's just say 10:30, 12 a.m. for now. And below that section, we want to add another section which will have a class of post liker, and this is the wrapper for the buttons to add likes and show likes and remove likes. And in there we'll create a p tag which holds a span with the class of post likes, and we'll keep the number in the span so that we can update it. We'll say 0 likes for now, space and 0 likes, and below that we'll add another span with the class of add like with a plus, and another span with the class of remove like with a minus, and save that for now. And if you look at the HTML, it's quite ugly. So at this point we should start styling our post so that we can at least look at something that's not destructive to our eyes. So Choo is a very lightweight framework, JavaScript framework, and we need a bundler to pack it all out for us and include it into our HTML. The way we start using Choo is by just importing it into our project, and Choo provides us a few helper functions or methods that makes it quite easy for us to create an application. So each application you have what's called state, and state is something that is available to your whole app, and when state changes you want your app to update. What frameworks do is that it really improves that flow for you. So we have the big players like React, Angular, Vue.js, which is, all of them are great frameworks. Maybe not so much Angular in my opinion, but I like Vue and React. My favorite is Vue if you care about what I like. But what Choo is, it's very small, and it doesn't require a lot of learning and setting up and installing. Things like Vue and React, you're very bound to what they want you to do. With choo, you're quite free. They have a few functions that you need to use, obviously, to be able to use the framework, but it's all very familiar, recognizable code if you're familiar with JavaScript and HTML. So let's get started by importing the framework to our JavaScript file, which is included in our HTML. And when we include this file as is, it won't work because the browser doesn't understand require. This is Node syntax, so we need bundlers to be able to pull the code and create it to be able to run it in a browser environment. So that's why we use Parcel as the bundler. So after bringing in choo, we can create an app by initializing it with the choo variable. Save that, and we can create routes. And if you want to learn more about these things, feel free to check out the documentation. Sorry, we have to do app.route. And the home route, we want to render something called a layout. So at the moment, this doesn't make sense, and I'm pretty sure if we check the console, we'll have an error. Layout is not defined. So what we're saying is that when we go to the route, the home route, render the layout that we defined as layout. So what choo allows us to do is to use a helper library to render this HTML from JavaScript. So I'm going to bring that in with const HTML equals require choo slash HTML. And we need to create the layout, and the layout will be a function that returns the HTML that we want to show on the page. So let's say const layout equals a function. For now, it doesn't take any arguments, and this will return HTML, which has a little bit of a weird syntax because the HTML is immediately succeeded by template literals, and in here is where you write your HTML. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the index.html code into this layout so that we can see it render exactly the same thing. So let's open our files, go to index.html. I'm going to leave div id content in there, and you'll see in a minute why I do that. So the second last div, I'm going to just cut that out, close that down, save that, all our code will disappear, and I'll paste that in there. And one caveat about choo, there might be plugins or extensions in VS Code that allows you to have autocomplete and suggestions and stuff like that in the template literals. But when you write template literals, it's basically a big string of HTML. So you'll probably need some sort of extension or something to help you write your code. But I'm going to keep it old-fashioned and just write the code by hand. So I'm going to save that. And at the moment, nothing happens, even though we're returning the HTML and we're using it on the route. And the reason is because we haven't mounted the app yet. And we do that by saying app.mount, and then we give it the selector, and the selector is the element you want to mount it on. And the reason I made this extra div is because it looks at this div and it has to match the element that you choose, and it also has to be the same element in your HTML that it is mounting on. We actually don't even need this content ID because I never used it, but I'll leave it like that for now. And then if we save that and refresh our browser, we'll see our exact same application. So at the moment, it's still a non-working static HTML page, but now we have the ability to create state, and we can update things, and we can loop through things, and we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. So let's jump into it. So for now, we'll stay in this one index.js file just to show you that it's entirely possible to create a application from one file, but we'll probably start moving out into files as we go along, because just so that we can manage our code a little bit better. And this is one thing that I really like about Choo. It's up to you how you want to organize your code. Choo is an action-driven or event-driven framework, so it uses events to update things and change things. So you might want to create a folder called actions and store all your actions and the state they're supposed to update in that file. Or the way I did it is I created a state folder, I created templates folder, and I'm going to use those folders as ways for me to organize my code and make sure that it's readable and maintainable. Let's get into state. When we talk about state, it's basically a way for your application to have a central controller that knows about what's going on with the data on the page, and it has ways to change or give you that data on request. And the way Choo does that is it stores it in a function, a normal JavaScript function. So I'm going to call it state because I'm um, not creative. And state takes two parameters. It takes the state, and it also has an emitter, which we'll work with later. What we'll do with this state is we'll store our data in there. So for now, let's just store the static post data. We can see that there's content, there's created, and there's likes. So we'll use this state to populate our layout here with the data instead of it being statically typed here. And the way we do that is we have to add all our data to the state parameter or object, which will be mounted to our app, and it would be available to all our layouts and components that we create. For now, let's say state.post equals an object, and we'll give it a title of hello world, and we'll give it a created of new date dot to local time string. I think it's en-us is what I use. I'm not sure if that's a thing, but that's what I'm going to use. Let me just wrap this for you. And the likes. A post should not have likes when it's created, so we'll make 0 likes. And if we save that, our application is exactly the same, but what we can do now is we can use this state on our app. So what we're going to do is we're going to say app.use state. Save that. So now in our layout we should have the state available as a parameter. So we can clear the empty thing and say state, because we're saying app.use and we're using the layout in our route, the app is providing state to our layout. So we can say, instead of our post content here being static, we can say template literal, which is another cool way they implemented this, because this is already a normal thing you can use in HTML and JavaScript. So I'm going to say state.title. For the time, I'm going to say state.created, and for the likes, I'm going to say state.likes. That's what I called it, right? Yeah, save that. I see the mistake. In our state, we created a post object, which has all the available data, and at the moment I'm using the state object itself, and title and created probably is not available on the state object. So I'm going to say state.post.title, state.post.created, and state.post.likes. Save that, and there we go. We have our newly created post, and there's the time we created it, and it has 0 likes. At the moment, we can't do anything about the likes, we can't create a post, but we know that this is dynamically rendered from our state. So we should be able to mutate our state and add some of these and change their likes. So let's do that in the next step. So in order for us to mutate our state, and for me to give you an example of that, I'm going to start with the likes of this particular post. What we want to do is, as soon as this button is clicked, we want to send a message to the state saying, hey, this button was clicked, please update the likes, make it more. And if this one's clicked, please update the likes and make it less. So choo provides us a very easy way to do that by giving us the emitter in the state parameters. So the way we use the emitter is we listen for this event. And we're going to say emitter.on, and I'm going to call it add-like. And then it takes a callback function. And this callback function is where you'll mutate your state. And we'll say state.post.likes plus plus. And in order to update the DOM, the document object model, to send that to the user interface, we need to render it. And the emitter provides us a way to do that by saying emitter.emit and the render, and save that. So in order for us to use that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function in the layout called add. And the reason I'm creating a function is because if we call that directly from the HTML or add that function directly to the HTML, it's going to update as the page loads. We should create a function and create an event listener on our plus button and then emit that. And in order to emit that, we are provided with another parameter called emit in our layout. So let's start by just saying emit, and this is where we emit the exact same event as we're listening to for in the state. So what will happen is we'll listen to the add-like event, and as it's listening, we'll send that event to the emitter, and it'll say, okay, let's add some likes, and then it'll re-render the page. So in order to call this, we have to go to our like button, and we'll add an on-click listener. And again, choo makes it very simple for us. We create a template literal, and we can just say add, because that's the function name that we gave. Let's save that, go to the page, click plus, and there you can see the likes are updating. At the moment, I can infinitely add likes because adding that logic is a bit redundant to make sure that if it's already liked, you can't like it again. But I'll leave it like this for the moment. If you want to, you can clone the repository and add some logic to it. So what we want next is to be able to unlike an object. Let me refresh the page, and you'll see it goes back to 0 because we aren't persisting any of this data. If you want to persist it, you can use your local storage, or you can actually create a database. But for this simple example, I won't persist the data. I'll just make it dynamic so that you can see the basics of choo. So next up, I'm just going to copy this exact same emitter function, but I'll call it remove like. And what it'll do is it'll decrease the likes on that post. Save that, and then we'll have to do the exact same logic for both. This is copy and paste programming. Don't judge me for that. I'm trying to save time, and we'll do the same here. We'll remove it, and we'll remove the like. So again, what it's doing is it's listening for the remove like event, and when it is triggered, it'll decrease the likes, and it'll emit the re-rendering of the data on the page. So on the button, we listen to on-click, we call remove. The function should be inside our layout because that's where we have the emit available to us, and then it should decrease the likes. So let's start by adding a few likes and then removing a few likes. And at the moment you can negative like something. Again, just a few lines of logic, which I'm not going to get into now because I want to keep this video as impactful as possible. So the next step is to be able to create posts and let them show below the recent posts title. Uh, this requires a little bit of refactoring in the code because it's going to get too large to manage, and I think we should think about what is going to happen. I mean, it's going to be an array instead of an object because there's more than one post, which means we'll have to have some sort of looping effect, and I think it's better to split up the code at this point and make it look a little bit more readable. So just a recap of the file structure: we only have an index.html, which is importing our index.js. We have a bundler running on server 1234 that's building, using this HTML as an entry point and building this index.js for us. Then we have a div where we will plant all of our layout code, and the index.js that we're importing is where all our choo code is, and choo is basically being imported. It's initialized as an app. We require the HTML helper functions so that we can render HTML in the layout. Then we have a state which we use in the app, and that allows us to have access to the state and emit in our layout, which we can use to use, update, add, remove, mutate our state basically. And in our layout we have those functions that help us do that. So what I'm thinking at the moment is I'm going to split up the code into layout files and into state files so that our index.js stays a little bit cleaner and easier to read. So I'm going to create a folder called layouts, and I'm going to create another folder called state, and state only needs an index.js. Later, if you want to modularize your state, you can name your files something a bit more descriptive, but I'm only going to have one state, so I'm just going to call it index. And our layouts, we are going to have more than one layout because we want to modularize our layout in the background and make these posts a layout of their own, so that we can only focus on that code in one layout and just plug it into the main layout holder. So I'm going to call the main layout, I'm going to call index.js, and the posts layout I'm just going to call posts.js. So at the moment we don't have a post.js layout yet. We have all of it in our main index.js, this one, and this is the layout that we use. So I'm gonna remove that from our index.js completely, just cut it out, go to our layouts, paste it in there, and because we are exporting this now, we can just say module.export to make it available to our main file. Save that, go back to this file, and we can just we have to remove this HTML function now because we're not using layouts in our main file, but we're using it in here. So we need it to be able to use this this nice helper function that they provide us. So we'll save that into our layouts file. And index.js, we need to bring in this layouts because we're using a layout and it's no longer available. So let's go right above the route. Let's just say const layout equals require layouts. And we don't have to say index because the require syntax knows that we mean index if we just say layouts. So now the app is still using the layout on the home route, and we can test that by saving and refreshing, and we see it's available. And the way you look at it, or you could look at it, is by the time updating every time we refresh the page means the state is updating, or that it is the current available post that we create here. So the next thing I want to um, sort of abstract out of this file is to put the state in this index.js. So let's go back and just take our state out of here, go to the state file, paste that in. We don't need the name anymore, we can just say module.exports, and that takes the state and emitter, and then we need to use that state, so we're going to say const state equals require the state. Save that, and that should still work. Yes, it's still updating. And that makes our index.js file a whole lot smaller. And what this allows you to do is you can create many layouts, full pages or component type layouts, and import them all in this section. I'll comment them out. Importing layouts. Using our state. And rendering layouts. So now we can, let's say, rendering routes. So now we can map each of these layouts to a specific route, and it would be more clear what we're doing. So if we have, let's say, 4 layouts, we'll have four different routes to display those layouts if we want to scale the application. But for now we only have one, and we'll only have one main layout being rendered, but as you'll see later, we can render layouts within layouts, and this creates a component type effect. So let's get started on that. So in order to change our state to accommodate for the list of posts, we'll have to create an array instead of a single object. And this will break our code in many places because it is now using an array instead of the object. So we'll have to go to our layouts, and instead of saying state.post, we'll have to say state.posts at 0 because it's the first item in the array. And we have to say state.post at 0 here as well. And in our emitter, we'll have to change up what we're changing here, state and post at 0. Save, and if we refresh that, it looks like it's still working. This is still not completely dynamic because we only have one post. So how do we create a way to use posts as an array, use many of the posts, and make sure that when we click on a specific post, only that one is targeted? That's what we're going to do in the next step. So to get started, let's first create a way to add posts from this input. And of course, we'll use our state for that and listen to a create post event and create a new post in our state. So let's say emitter.on create post, and we'll have a callback function. And this callback function actually will have some data with it. So how do we send data to our emitter? It's quite easy. We just create a parameter or argument, because when we call this, we can add data to the emit function, and it will be received by this emitter. So what we want to do is we want to say let new post equals the object, which will be content. We'll just send the data as the content. We'll have to put an equal sign here. The created, you already know, we have to new date dot to local time string. I don't even know if this is a thing, I'm just using it because I saw it sometime. And then likes obviously is 0 when it's created. Save that. Then what we want to do with that data is we want to push it into our state. So we can just say state.posts.push new post. And this again is a good illustration of how choo.js basically just uses known JavaScript, known things that you already know as a developer, as a JavaScript developer. And so now that we've created the create post event, we have to actually send it through from the UI. And currently our UI is all situated in the main layout, and the data that we want to send is the value of our text input, and the way we're going to send it is by clicking on the button. So we're going to fill something in here, create the post, and it's going to be added. So the way we do that is we're going to create another function in our layout, and we're going to call it create post. This function will take well, the function won't take anything, it's just create post. And what it will do is it will have a value. Let's say post data is equal to document dot get element by ID, and we call the input post, so get element by ID post dot value. Save that. Let's make it wrapped. Save that. Let's just wrap this up so you can see. So the post data will be document.get element by ID post, which is nothing happens because we aren't calling this create post function yet. And where we want to do that is on the submit. So we're going to say onClick equals create post. Save that. Refresh the page in case. Let's say hello again and create post. So our form is clearing. That's a good thing. But our post isn't being added to the page. And the reason why is because we are still using the static store. So if we'll log the event, so let's say in our state, let's look at the state.posts after adding the post. State.posts, we'll have to log that. Save. Let's open our console. Let's add a post. Hello. Need to move that over here. Create, and we have two posts. The hello world and that one with a different time. Again, hello. Create that post. Now we have 3 posts in our state. So the question is, how do we render 3 posts on here if we have a layout which is statically putting the post in there? Are we going to create a for loop and use that as the posts? I guess you could do that if you can figure it out, but actually Choo provides a nicer way of doing that, and it's not that they provide it, it's that it's already built into JavaScript, but it's a nicer way of accomplishing this goal. So let's have a look at that. So the way we're going to do this is by taking this post object or post HTML and making it its own layout. And for each post, we'll basically generate an entire post layout inside the main layout. So inside layouts, I've already created the post file. We need the helper library from Choo to render the HTML. And we have to export our layout. And it is exported as a function. And what this does is it returns the HTML, which has that backtick syntax, and this HTML is going to be the same as the post, or it is going to be the post. You can just cut that out, put it in post, and now we've moved our post code into an exported function. But state.post.title won't exist. We can add the state here and the emit function here and save that and go to layouts, and in this div where posts used to be, we have to import the posts layout now. So we'll say const posts equals require the posts from the same file, and then in here, as you'll see, we saved that and the posts have disappeared, but in here we can add a template literal and just say posts and save that. And now it's bringing in this function, so we have to invoke that post, save that, everything breaks. And that's because if we look at it, it doesn't know where this post is coming from. If we look at the state and the posts layout, and it says title created posts, but state is now a parameter of this layout. So we could go in the layout and pass down the state and the emit so that it receives both. Save that. And now it says add is not defined because we have to move our add and remove functions as well. Save that.
And now our post is back, and our add likes and remove likes still works. But we don't want to use the actual 0 index of the post only for this rendering. We want to render all of the posts. When we create a post and add it, we want to see it actually update on the page. So the way we'll do that is we'll go to our layout, and we'll use a built-in JavaScript method called map, and it's a method on the array object. So what we'll do is we'll say
use the posts in the state. We'll say state.posts.map, and what it takes is the posts, the actual posts layout. If we save that, refresh, it breaks again. So we're kind of doing error-driven development, and it says property 0 is undefined. So now we have to remove that property, remove that, and you can immediately see that this will cause a problem because we have the state and emit that we're using inside the template, but in the layout we're only using the posts and we're not sending down the state and emit anymore. But as soon as we add that to the posts, it's going to break, and it's going to tell us that the reason it's breaking is because it doesn't know what parameter you're giving it, because this posts is not the same as the post that if we just type it in statically. It's an actual post itself instead of the entire post layout, so we cannot send the state to that thing. So what we need to do is we have to rewrite this thing as state.posts.map, which basically takes each element of the array and returns that element. That's why we get that post. If we say posts, it's going to map over that, but we want to pass a parameter to each post so that it has the state available. So I'm going to create a new function called post, which returns that post's layout with the state available to it. So this post is going to take a few parameters. It's going to have the object, and it's going to have the index. So what we want to do is we want to return the posts, and we want to say give this post so you can pass it the state now and the emit. So we can say state emit. So at the moment we are returning the posts with 3 parameters: the emit, the object, and the index. And this is what's provided to us by the framework itself. Because if we look at the post, we aren't supplying it with any parameters, but it is receiving parameters in this function. So what it's doing is it's allowing us to access the actual post object within that array on that specific index, and it's giving us the object and the index, but that's just what map does by itself. So it's not something supplied by choo itself, but it's a smart way of using it. So what we can do is we can access that post and the specific post on that index, and then we can emit the post. I mean, we can give it the emit function from choo, and we can give it the post, and we can give it the index. At the moment, we kind of don't need the index, so I'm going to delete that, and I'll delete that as well because I think that's an optional parameter. I'll save that, and then in the posts we need to change our parameters a little bit. So instead of receiving the state and emit, we'll be receiving a post. We'll be receiving the emit function first, and then we'll receive the post as an object. So let's save that, and if you look at layouts, it's the same. We have emit and object, and that object is the post coming from map. So if we want to access that in post now, we won't be using the state anymore because state is being passed on from state.post.map. So we don't need the state in our posts component anymore. So we can just replace all the state.posts as the post object. Save that, and you'll see we have our initial post ready to go, and we can like it. But what happens now is if we add a post, hi again, it's me, how are you? Create that post, and it's added, but we don't have the content. So at the moment when we add it, we create it, it adds an empty post, and if we try to like it, it increases the likes on the first post. So we still have a bit of thinking to do in this situation. The reason why the content isn't showing on this specific post is because of a code error, and actually not because of implementing the framework correctly. And the same with the likes. If we go to posts, if we go to the state and we look at state.post, it has a title created in likes, but when I created a new post, I created content instead of title. And this should fix the title problem. Hello again. And create that. So there we have our second post with a different time. And the likes issue is because still we haven't updated our code in our state, where if we add like, we want to update posts, but not at 0. So this is where the index comes in and what's important about the index in this object. So we'll be receiving the index from the post function that is given by the map function, and we want to use that in our template, post template, and we'll save that. And in our post template, we'll pass down in the emit function the index when we emit it, and we'll receive the index here as well. So what's happening now is we're sending the emit function, the object itself, and the index. We're receiving it here, and when we click add, we want to emit that, but at that index. So now in our state, we want to use that index that we're receiving. So we can remove the empty parameters, give it the index over here, and now we can use I instead of a static 0. Save that, and let's try it out. Hi again. Create post. We have our hi again. It's 207.13. If we like it, it increases only this post's like. If we like this one, only that one increases, only this one decreases. And this can go on forever. Let's add another one. And each post is an individual object, and that is the basis of our application. Maybe posts shouldn't be adding at the bottom if they're new, so maybe we can, in our layouts, let's try something. We can map it, but when we display it, we can reverse, I think, is a JavaScript function. What did I do? Reverse. Save. Try again. Yes. So now all the new posts are adding at the top of the page, as they should, because it's chronological and you want to see what you posted in order. So that is the basics of our application. And just to recap this confusing teaching style or whatever you may call it that I have, probably all over the place, but I hope it made a little bit sense because I'm new to this framework as well. I kind of learn as I go. But let's start from the beginning. First, we installed our dependencies in our package.json, which is only the choo library and only parcel bundler, which is awesome because most front-end frameworks you install one thing, but it needs a bunch of dependencies to get up and running. Choo also uses things under the hood, but it's in the end it's in essence only 4 kilobytes, and the bundler does all the magic for you. After installing and setting our start script in our npm package.json, we can run our server and it gives us a local host. We create our index.html, which is the entry point which is being served, and we need to include our index.js where our app resides. In the index.js, we require choo. We create the app from it. We create state. We use the state. We create a layout. We render that layout on a specific route, and we mount that on a div, which is the same element that the layout starts with, and also the same element within your index.html. And reviewing our index.js, state is an object that we create in a function that we create in a file, which exports some base data that we statically type, and it has event listeners or emitter events. And each of these events come from the layouts. So we have an add like event, a remove like event, which finds a post at a specific index and increases or decreases its likes depending on the events. And we have a create post event, which is coming from our input, and we create a new post item with that, and we push it into our array. We don't have to log it every time, and we emit the render after each event so that it shows up on the page. In our layouts, we have our base layout, which is our complete page, which I would call this a layout, and I would call posts a component. So we could probably create a components folder and move our component like things into there. But what that does is it uses choo's HTML library, and it returns us a little bit of HTML. The layout takes the state and the emit, which is provided by choo, and we can use that state and emit to uh, render some data in our component. In this case, we are using the posts array that we have in our state and mapping it and returning the post of that map, and then we reverse it in order um, to display it in chronological order. But the post that we're mapping, we return the posts with the emit function, the post itself, and the uh, index of that post. So when we say returning posts with that, what that's doing is it's going to the posts component, giving it, supplying it those parameters, and it's returning this HTML. So in essence, what it's doing is it's for each post, it's mapping the HTML into its own little div, and it's giving it those different parameters so that it has access to the post itself. It can emit events to our state, and we can use the index to make sure that we target the correct object in the state array, in the posts array in the state. And we have click listeners on our like and dislike buttons, which is calling these functions, which is emitting the events. Same with our layout. We have a listener on our input submit, which is calling create posts, which is emitting the create post with the value of the input. And that's it. I really hope this made sense. The more I speak, the more I confuse myself as well. I hope it made sense in some way after editing, etc. But if you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, maybe a share or whatever, comment. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me how I messed up, how you could improve this code. Maybe fork it on GitHub, make some pull requests. Let's build a social media together. Um, so that's been it from me with Choo with Front End Framework Friday. I hope this is something I can continue. Um, If not, so be it. It was fun. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.